The morning sun of Prime painted the crystal towers in golden light. High Counselor stood on his office balcony, watching the peaceful city below. Children played in floating parks while their parents worked in gleaming buildings that reached toward the clouds. Trade ships moved slowly between the orbital stations like gentle giants carrying goods from distant worlds. Smiled as he watched this perfect scene. His people had built a civilization based on peace and knowledge. They had never known war. They had never needed weapons beyond simple tools for mining and construction. They traded fairly with all species and shared their technology freely. In return, the galaxy respected them and left them in peace. The emergency alarm shattered his peaceful thoughts. Rushed to his command center where panicked voices filled the air. On the main screen, something impossible appeared. Dark shapes moved against the stars, bigger than any ship they had ever seen. They looked alive somehow, with surfaces that rippled like skin and twisted like muscle. High Counselor, called out Communications Officer A, her voice shaking. We're receiving reports from our outer colonies. Something is attacking them. Attacking, could barely understand the word. Who would attack us? We have treaties with everyone. Sir, these aren't ships from any known species. They're different. The screen changed to show footage from 7, one of their mining colonies. Massive biomechanical creatures descended from space like living nightmares. They had no clear shape, constantly changing form as they landed. Where they touched the ground, the earth itself began to disappear, consumed by hungry mouths that opened along their surfaces. Watched in horror as the creatures extended tube-like appendages into the planet's crust. The ground around these feeding tubes turned gray and lifeless as everything was drained away. Trees, buildings, even the air itself seemed to flow into the hungry beasts. The colonists, he whispered. We lost contact 20 minutes ago, A replied quietly. More alarms began sounding. Reports flooded in from across space. The creatures had appeared simultaneously at 7 different colonies. They moved with purpose and coordination, suggesting intelligence behind the attack. Activated the emergency council session. Within minutes, the greatest minds of his civilization gathered in the holographic chamber. Scientists, engineers, and philosophers all looked to him for answers he didn't have. What are we facing? He asked Dr. Their Best. Based on the readings, these creatures are unlike anything in our databases. They appear to be consuming entire planets for raw materials. Their biology is partly organic, partly mechanical. They adapt quickly to any resistance. Resistance? Asked another council member. What resistance? Our mining ships have only cutting lasers. This was the horrible truth they now faced. They had built a civilization without weapons. Their ships carried tools, not guns. Their people knew art and science, not war. They had never needed to learn how to fight because they had never met anything that wanted to destroy them. Send our defense fleet, ordered desperately. Sir, replied Fleet Coordinator N. Our defense fleet consists of 43 mining ships and 18 exploration vessels. They have no armor and no weapons beyond industrial equipment. The first engagement was a massacre. The ships approached the creatures with peaceful intentions, broadcasting diplomatic messages in hundreds of languages. The creatures responded by releasing smaller bioships that swarmed the peaceful vessels. Within minutes, the entire fleet was destroyed or captured. The creatures didn't just destroy the ships. They consumed them, breaking down the metal and technology and incorporating it into their own forms. The survivors who escaped in emergency pods reported that the creatures seemed to learn from each ship they consumed, becoming stronger and smarter. By the end of the first day, 3 colonies had been completely consumed. The creatures moved on to the next targets, leaving behind dead worlds stripped of all resources. Where beautiful planets had once orbited their suns, only empty rocks remained. Panic spread across space. Billions of peaceful beings faced extinction from an enemy they couldn't understand or fight. Their technology, so advanced in peaceful applications, proved useless against creatures that existed only to consume and destroy. "We need help," announced to the emergency session. "Send distress signals to all known civilizations." The responses that came back broke heart. Most species expressed sympathy but claimed they were too far away to help. Others admitted they had encountered these devourers before and barely escaped with their own lives. A few civilizations even suggested that they should surrender and evacuate their remaining worlds. "No one is coming," a reported sadly. "They say their fleet is committed elsewhere. The Republic claims they lack sufficient forces. Even the Galactic Defense Coalition says these creatures are beyond their capabilities." Stared at the tactical display showing the Devourers' relentless advance. At their current rate of consumption, the creatures would reach prime in less than 2 weeks. His entire civilization would be extinct within a month. "There is one more option," said Doctor quietly. "We could broadcast on the emergency frequencies used by exploration vessels in the Outer Rim territories. Most civilizations ignore those signals, but there might be someone out there." "Do it," ordered. "Send everything we know about these creatures. Maybe someone somewhere will have answers we don't." The signal went out into the dark spaces beyond known civilization. It carried the desperate plea of a dying race, along with all their scientific data about the Devourers. Most of the galaxy ignored it or dismissed it as hopeless. But in the Outer Rim territories, where strange ships from an unknown world patrolled the borders of explored space, someone was listening. Someone whose people had never known peace the way they had. Someone whose civilization had been forged in the fires of a world that tried to kill them every single day. Admiral Sarah read the alien distress signal twice, then called her staff officers to the bridge of the Terra's wrath. The message was clear. An entire peaceful civilization faced extinction from an enemy that consumed worlds. Her duty was to protect human space, not to rescue aliens 3 months' travel away. Her superiors would probably order her to ignore the signal and continue her patrol. But as looked at the tactical data that had provided, she made a decision that would change the galaxy forever. "Navigation," she called out. "Plot a course for space, maximum speed." "Ma'am," her executive officer protested, "we don't have authorization for." "We'll get authorization on the way," interrupted. "And send word to High Command. Tell them to mobilize every ship we have. We're going to need the entire fleet for this one." The message went out across human space. They were going to war. Admiral Sarah stood in the war room of Terra Station, humanity's largest military base. The holographic display showed star charts spanning half the galaxy, with red markers indicating the path of destruction left by the Devourers. Her staff officers gathered around the table, their faces grim as they studied the data. "Show me what we're dealing with," ordered. Commander activated the display. "They sent us everything they had before their last colony went dark. These Devourers aren't like anything we've seen before. They're part living creature, part machine. They consume entire planets and use the resources to build more of themselves." "How many are there?" asked Captain from the Marine Corps. "Intelligence estimates at least 200 large bioships, each the size of a small city, plus thousands of smaller attack craft. They move as a coordinated swarm, suggesting a hive mind controlling them." Studied the tactical data. Other species had tried to fight these creatures with energy weapons and conventional explosives. Everything had failed. The Devourers adapted to each attack, their bioarmor becoming resistant to whatever weapons were used against them. "What makes us think we can do better?" asked Commander Park from the Engineering Corps. Smiled grimly. "Because we're human, we come from Earth." The other officers nodded. They all knew what that meant. Earth wasn't like the peaceful worlds where most alien species evolved. Earth was a Class 12, where everything from the weather to the wildlife tried to kill its inhabitants every single day. While other species developed on gentle planets with stable climates and friendly ecosystems, humans had evolved in a world of constant danger. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, predators, diseases, storms that could flatten cities. Earth had thrown everything at humanity, and humanity had not only survived but thrived. This harsh upbringing had shaped human military thinking in ways that other species couldn't understand. Where aliens saw war as a last resort to be avoided, humans saw it as another problem to solve with determination and creativity. Where other species fought to minimize losses, humans fought to win at any cost. "Send word to all fleet commanders," ordered. "Operation Rescue Storm is now active. I want every available ship ready for combat deployment within 72 hours." The response was immediate and massive. From Earth itself, the Home Defense Fleet began moving toward the assembly point. From Mars, the Red Planet Squadron launched with their heavy assault ships. From the Jupiter mining colonies, the Outer System patrol vessels joined the growing armada. Within 2 days, the largest human military force in history had assembled in the Sol system. 847 warships of every class and configuration waited for orders. The smallest were destroyer escorts designed for fast strikes. The largest were massive dreadnoughts built to slug it out with enemy fleets in prolonged battles. The flagship of this incredible fleet was the Terra's Wrath, a super dreadnought that represented everything humans had learned about building warships. Where alien vessels were designed for efficiency and elegance, the Terra's Wrath was built like a fortress that could fly. Its armor was thicker than most alien ships were wide. Its weapons could crack planets. Its crew was trained to fight even if the ship was crippled and burning around them. General Martinez, the overall ground forces commander, briefed on the Marine contingent. "We've got 50,000 combat Marines ready for deployment. Full-powered armor, heavy weapons, close combat specialists. If this fight goes to boarding actions, we'll be ready." Review the troop lists. These weren't ordinary soldiers. Human Marines were volunteers from a warrior species, trained from childhood to fight in the worst possible conditions. They had served on airless moons, in toxic atmospheres, and in gravity fields that would crush most aliens. They were used to fighting enemies that were bigger, stronger, and better armed than they were. But it wasn't just their physical capabilities that made human forces dangerous. It was their mentality. Humans had a concept that confused and terrified other species: acceptable losses. While alien commanders tried to win battles without casualties, human commanders were willing to sacrifice thousands of troops if it meant achieving their objectives. This wasn't cruelty, it was mathematics. Humans understood that sometimes the only way to save 1,000,000 lives was to sacrifice 1,000. It was a cold calculation that peaceful species couldn't make, but one that warriors from accepted as necessary. "What about our alien observers?" asked Commander Torres from Intelligence. Looked at the diplomatic section of the briefing. Representatives from dozens of alien civilizations had requested permission to observe the human response. Some were genuinely curious about human military capabilities. Others clearly expected to witness humanity's first major defeat. "Let them watch," decided. "They need to understand what they're dealing with when they interact with us." The alien observers were given quarters on the observation ships that would follow the main fleet at a safe distance. Many of them had never seen human warships up close, and the experience was unsettling. Human ships looked wrong to alien eyes: too heavily armored, too heavily armed, too willing to sacrifice everything for raw combat effectiveness. Ambassador and of the Peaceful Collective filed a report that would later become famous throughout the galaxy. Human warships are not vessels of exploration or trade that have been armed for defense. They are weapons that have been given the ability to travel between stars. Every line of their design speaks of a species that has never known true peace. The final member of staff was Dr. Elizabeth Warren, the assigned to study the Devourer threat. She had spent days analyzing the data, trying to understand how the enemy thought. The Devourers show signs of collective intelligence, Warren reported. They adapt quickly to new threats, but their adaptations follow predictable patterns. They expect their enemies to fight logically, using the most efficient weapons and tactics available. And that's their weakness, realized. They've never fought humans before. Warren nodded. Every species they've encountered fights to minimize their own losses while maximizing enemy casualties. It's logical, efficient, and predictable. But humans fight to win, finished, even if it means doing things that look insane to outside observers. The fleet's departure from Sol's system was a sight that would be remembered for generations. 847 human warships activated their faster-than-light drives simultaneously, creating a light show visible across half the solar system. They jumped toward space in perfect formation, carrying with them the hopes of one dying civilization and the fury of another. As news of the human response spread throughout the galaxy, reactions varied wildly. Some species expressed admiration for humanity's willingness to help strangers. Others worried about what this massive military deployment might mean for galactic peace. A few began quietly preparing their own defenses, just in case the humans decided not to stop with rescuing the. But in the depths of space, moving inexorably toward their next target, the Devourers continued their consumption. They had encountered dozens of species over the centuries, and all had fallen before their adaptive might. They had no reason to believe that these new creatures called humans would be any different. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The greatest military force in human history raced through hyperspace toward its destiny. In 3 months, they would arrive at space. The galaxy would finally see what happened when the children of a went to war. And nothing would ever be the same. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of territory and found themselves looking into hell. Admiral stared at the tactical display on the bridge of the Terra's Wrath, trying to process what she was seeing. The space around Prime was filled with massive bioships that every rule of engineering she knew. They weren't built, they had grown. Organic surfaces rippled with unnatural movement, while mechanical parts jutted out at impossible angles. "My God," whispered Commander, "what are those things?" The largest Devourer ships were kilometers long, shaped like massive worms with armor plating that shifted and changed even as they watched. Smaller craft swarmed around them like flies around a corpse, each one unique in its horrible design. They moved with purpose, but without the clean lines and logical construction that marked every other known species' technology. "Sensors are picking up organic and mechanical signatures," reported Lieutenant Park from the sensor station. "It's like they're part living creature, part machine. The boundaries keep changing." But the ships themselves weren't the worst part. The worst part was what they were doing to the planets below. Prime hung in space like a dying animal. Massive feeding tubes extended from the bioships down to the planet's surface, draining away everything they touched. Where the beautiful crystal cities had once stood, could see only gray wastelands slowly expanding outward from each feeding site. "Communications," ordered. "Try to raise any surviving forces." The response came immediately, desperate and frightened. "Human fleet, this is Commander of the Home Guard. Please, you have to help us. They're consuming our world. They're consuming everything." "Patch him through to the main screen," ordered. The alien who appeared on the screen barely looked like the same species they had seen in the diplomatic files. Commander's elegant features were twisted with exhaustion and fear. Behind him, could see others working frantically at damaged control stations. "How many ships do you have left?" asked. 17 vessels, mostly civilian transports we've armed with mining lasers. We've been trying to evacuate the population, but those things keep intercepting our ships. Admiral, we've lost over 2 billion people already." Felt anger building in her chest. There were peacekeepers, artists, and scientists. They had never hurt anyone. They didn't deserve this kind of destruction. Commander, I need you to pull your remaining ships back to minimum safe distance. We're going to engage these creatures. Admiral, you don't understand. We've tried everything. Energy weapons don't work. They adapt to whatever you use against them. Each attack makes them stronger. We'll see about that, replied grimly. All ships, battle formation Alpha, prepare for combat. The human fleet spread out into attack position with practiced efficiency. Unlike the elegant formations favored by most species, human battle formations were designed for one purpose: to deliver maximum firepower while maintaining the ability to ram enemy vessels if necessary. Studied the enemy positions. The Devourers had organized themselves into feeding clusters around each planet, with the largest bioships anchored to the surface, while smaller craft provided protection. It was an efficient system for strip mining worlds, but it left them vulnerable to coordinated attack. All ships target the feeding tubes first, cut off their ability to drain the planet. The first human salvo lit up space with weapons fire. Particle beams, plasma cannons, and missile volleys struck the bioships from multiple angles. The alien observers watching from their safe distance gasped at the sheer volume of firepower the humans could generate. For a moment, it looked like the attack was working. Several feeding tubes were severed, and the bioships writhed in apparent pain. But then the horrible adaptive nature of the Devourers became clear. The damaged areas began to heal, growing new armor that had a different texture than the original. When the humans fired again, their weapons were less effective. The bioships had adapted, their new armor resistant to the energy frequencies the humans had used. Weapons effectiveness dropping to 70%, reported the tactical officer. They're adapting faster than we expected. But wasn't discouraged. She had studied the reports from other species who had fought these creatures, and she had expected this kind of adaptation. The difference was that humans hadn't built their entire strategy around energy weapons. All ships switched to kinetic weapons, and mass drivers maximum velocity. The second human attack was completely different from the first. Instead of energy beams, the human ships fired solid projectiles at tremendous speeds. Metal slugs and explosive shells slammed into the bioships, tearing through their adaptive armor through simple brute force. The Devourers writhed and twisted as physical projectiles punched holes in their hulls. This time, the adaptation was slower. It was easier for them to adjust their bioarmor to resist energy than to develop defenses against chunks of metal moving at significant fractions of light speed. Direct hits on multiple targets, called out the tactical officer. We've destroyed 3 feeding tubes and damaged 4 smaller bioships. The Devourers' response was swift and coordinated. The smaller attack craft broke away from their defensive positions and swarmed toward the human fleet. They moved with insect-like coordination, attacking from multiple directions at once. Incoming fighters, warned the sensor operator, hundreds of them. Watched the tactical display as the Devourer attack craft closed on her ships. Each one was different, but they all shared the same disgusting combination of organic curves and mechanical weapons. Some had tentacle-like appendages that writhed as they flew. Others were covered in eyes that tracked the human ships with horrible intelligence. Point defense systems free fire. Fighter squadrons launch and engage. The space between the fleets erupted in violence as human fighters met Devourer attack craft in brutal close combat. The human pilots had trained for this kind of engagement their entire careers, but nothing had prepared them for fighting enemies that looked like flying nightmares. Lieutenant Commander Jackson led his squadron of Raptor fighters against a group of biocraft that looked like flying jellyfish with missile launchers. "Jesus, these things are ugly," he muttered over the comm. "All wings, remember your training. These aren't ships, they're animals. Aim for what looks like vital organs." The dogfight was unlike anything in military history. Human fighters used their superior speed and maneuverability to stay away from the biocraft's tentacle weapons, while firing missiles and cannon rounds into what appeared to be sensory organs or propulsion systems. But the Devourers had advantages too. When damaged, their craft could partially heal themselves, sealing hull breaches and rerouting around destroyed systems. Worse, when a bioship was destroyed completely, nearby craft would swarm over the wreckage and consume it, incorporating its mass into their own hulls. "We're losing fighters," reported Commander. "The enemy is literally eating our wreckage and getting stronger." Made a decision that would horrify most alien commanders but made perfect sense to human military thinking. All damaged fighters ram the nearest enemy craft. Don't let them salvage our wreckage. The order was carried out without hesitation. Human pilots whose ships were too damaged to continue fighting aimed their craft at enemy bioships and detonated their remaining missiles at point-blank range. It was wasteful by alien standards, but it prevented the Devourers from gaining strength from captured human technology. As the battle continued, realized they were fighting an enemy unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. The Devourers didn't just adapt to weapons, they adapted to tactics. After watching several ramming attacks, they began positioning their bioships to intercept damaged human fighters before they could reach primary targets. "Admiral," called Commander from the command ship, "your forces are fighting more effectively than anyone we've seen, but they're still adapting to your methods. How can you possibly win against an enemy that learns from everything you do?" Looked at the tactical display, where her fleet was locked in brutal combat with creatures that every convention of space warfare. Human ships were taking damage, and the enemy was indeed learning from each engagement. But she wasn't worried. "Commander," she replied, "you're thinking like every other species that's fought these things. You're assuming we'll keep using the same tactics and weapons until they adapt completely. What else can you do?" Smiled grimly. "We can be human, signal all ships, implement Combat Protocol 77 Alpha." "Ma'am, that's the Chaos Protocol. Are you sure?" "Do it." Across the human fleet, commanders received orders that would have seemed insane to any alien observer. Instead of maintaining formation and using standardized tactics, each ship was ordered to engage the enemy using completely random methods. Some ships would use energy weapons while others used kinetics. Some would attack in formation while others went in alone. Some would target the largest enemies while others focused on the smallest. The effect on the Devourers was immediate and devastating. Their hive mind, which had been successfully adapting to human tactics, suddenly couldn't predict what the humans would do next. Every ship attacked differently, using different weapons and different strategies. For the first time since the battle began, the Devourers started taking serious damage without being able to adapt effectively. Their collective intelligence was designed to analyze patterns and develop counters, but it couldn't counter pure chaos. "It's working," reported the tactical officer. "Enemy adaptation rate has dropped significantly. They can't keep up with our randomized tactics." But knew this was just the beginning. The real battle would come when they tried to assault the bioships directly, and for that, they would need to do something that no other species had ever attempted. They would need to board the creatures and fight them from the inside. The battle in space raged for 6 hours before Admiral made the decision that would determine the fate of the civilization. The human fleet had damaged many of the smaller Devourer craft, but the massive bioships remained largely intact, their feeding tubes still draining Prime of its life. "Status report, ordered from the bridge of the Terra's Wrath. We've destroyed 43 enemy attack craft and damaged 12 of the smaller bioships," reported Commander. "But the main feeding vessels are barely scratched. Their armor is too thick, and they keep adapting to our weapons." Studied the tactical display. The largest bioships were positioned like massive ticks embedded in Prime's atmosphere, their feeding tubes extending deep into the planet's crust. Conventional weapons couldn't penetrate deep enough to cause critical damage, and the creature's adaptation ability meant that sustained bombardment was becoming less effective by the hour. General Martinez called to the Marine commander, "How quickly can your people be ready for boarding operations?" Martinez's face appeared on the secondary screen. Behind him, could see Marines in powered armor checking their weapons and equipment. "My boys and girls have been ready since we got here, Admiral, but are you sure about this? No one has ever successfully boarded one of those things." "That's because no one else is crazy enough to try it," replied. "These creatures expect us to fight them from a distance like every other species has done. They won't be prepared for close combat inside their own bodies." The plan was insane by any reasonable military standard. Human Marines would use assault shuttles to penetrate the bioship's hulls, then fight their way through the living corridors to reach vital systems. It was the kind of operation that peaceful species couldn't even imagine, but to humans who had evolved fighting predators in caves and forests, it was just another day at the office. "All Marine units prepare for immediate deployment," Martinez announced over the fleet communication system. "Remember your training. These aren't ships we're boarding, they're animals. Big, ugly, dangerous animals that happen to fly through space. Treat them accordingly." Sergeant Major led the first assault team toward the largest bioship. Her shuttle, the Angry Hornet, was designed specifically for combat boarding operations. Its armored hull could punch through most barriers, and its passenger compartment held 20 Marines in full-powered armor. "Look alive, Marines," called out as they approached the bioship. "Intelligence says these things have acidic atmosphere and variable gravity. Keep your suits sealed and your weapons ready." Through the shuttle's reinforced windows, the Marines could see their target growing larger. Up close, the bioship was even more horrifying than it had appeared on the tactical displays. Its surface writhed with constant movement, and they could see what looked like sensory organs tracking their approach. "30 seconds to breach," called the shuttle pilot. "Everyone hold on." The Angry Hornet slammed into the bioship's hull with tremendous force, its hardened nose cone punching through the organic armor. Emergency seals activated to prevent atmosphere loss as the shuttle's boarding tube extended into the creature's interior. "Go, go, go," shouted as the airlock opened. The Marines poured into the bioship's interior and immediately found themselves in an environment unlike anything they had trained for. The corridors were clearly organic, with walls that pulsed like the inside of a living throat. Bioluminescent patches provided dim, shifting light that made shadows dance and move in disturbing ways. "Jesus," muttered Private Collins as he stepped onto a floor that felt squishy beneath his armored boots. "It's like we're inside something's stomach." "Focus, Collins," snapped. "Remember, we're looking for what intelligence thinks might be the central nervous system. It should be toward the center of the creature." The Marines began moving through the organic corridors, their motion detectors showing the walls around them pulsing with life. The bioship's immune system had detected their presence, and they could see defensive organisms beginning to emerge from alcoves in the walls. The first Devourer defenders looked like a cross between spiders and snakes, with multiple legs ending in razor-sharp claws and mouths filled with acid-dripping teeth. They moved with insect-like coordination, trying to surround the human intruders. "Contact front," called Corporal Martinez as he opened fire with his assault rifle. The Marines' weapons had been specially selected for this mission. Instead of energy weapons that the creatures might adapt to, they carried simple kinetic firearms loaded with armor-piercing rounds. The theory was that it would be harder for the bioships to evolve resistance to bullets than to adapt to energy weapons. The theory proved correct. The Devourer defenders writhed and shrieked as armor-piercing rounds tore through their biomechanical bodies. Some tried to adapt by growing thicker carapaces, but the Marines simply switched to explosive rounds that shattered any armor the creatures could grow quickly enough to matter. "Keep moving," ordered. "Don't let them adapt to our position." This was classic human infantry tactics: constant movement and unpredictable behavior. While other species might have established defensive positions and tried to hold ground, the humans kept advancing deeper into the creature, never staying in one place long enough for effective countermeasures to develop. As they fought their way through the bioship's interior, the Marines began to understand the creature's layout. It wasn't designed like a normal ship with logical corridors and compartments. Instead, it was organized like a living body, with major organs connected by arterial passages and nervous system pathways. "Sergeant Major," called Private over the comm, "I'm reading massive energy signatures dead ahead. Looks like some kind of central processing area." Led her team toward the energy readings, fighting through increasingly desperate biological defenses. The creatures seemed to understand that the humans were approaching something vital, and their attacks became more frenzied. But the Marines had advantages that the bioship couldn't counter quickly enough. They were used to fighting in confined spaces against dangerous predators. Their powered armor protected them from the creature's acidic atmosphere and crushing tentacles. Most importantly, they fought with a level of aggression that the Devourers had never encountered. When Corporal Martinez ran out of ammunition, he drew his combat knife and began attacking the creature's defenders in hand-to-hand combat. When Private Singh's armor was damaged by acid, she continued fighting with a backup weapon while her suit's emergency systems kept her alive. When the corridor ahead was blocked by a mass of writhing tentacles, the Marines used shaped charges to blow a hole through the creature's own body. There, pointed ahead to a chamber filled with pulsing neural tissue connected by thick organic cables. That has to be the central nervous system. The chamber was defended by the largest devourer organisms they had encountered, creatures the size of bears with multiple heads and weapon limbs that could extend like whips. But the Marines had come too far to be stopped now. Singh covering fire. Martinez, Collins plant the charges. Everyone else keep those things off our backs. The battle in the neural chamber was savage and chaotic. Human Marines fought biomechanical monsters in a space that pulsed with alien thoughts and shifting gravity. The creature's weapons could slice through armor, but human determination and training proved superior to biological adaptation. As the Marines fought, they began to notice something strange. The creature's responses were becoming less coordinated. Its attacks were still fierce, but they lacked the precise timing that had characterized earlier encounters. "Sergeant Major," called excitedly, "look at these neural readings. I think we're actually disrupting its thought processes just by being here." Realized what it discovered. The Devourer's hive mind was designed to process logical, predictable threats. But human behavior, the willingness to board an enemy ship, fight through its interior, and attack its brain directly, was so far outside the creature's experience that it was causing system overload. "Plant those charges now," she ordered. "We're going to scramble this thing's brain." The explosive charges were specifically designed to disrupt neural tissue without destroying it completely. The goal wasn't to kill the bioship, but to damage its connection to the hive mind that controlled all the Devourers. As the charges detonated, the effect was immediate and dramatic. The bioship began convulsing, its corridors twisting and changing as the creature lost control of its own body. Throughout the chamber, the neural tissue sparked and writhed as feedback cascaded through the network. But the real impact was felt across the entire Devourer swarm. On dozens of other bioships, similar teams of human Marines were conducting identical operations. As each central nervous system was disrupted, the coordination that made the Devourers so dangerous began to break down. On the bridge of the Terra's Wrath, Admiral watched as the enemy formation began to collapse. Bioships that had moved with perfect coordination minutes earlier were now drifting aimlessly or even colliding with each other. "Admiral," reported the tactical officer, "we're seeing massive disruption in enemy communications. Their attack coordination has completely broken down." Smiled grimly. "All ships concentrate fire on the feeding vessels. Take them out while they're confused." The final phase of the battle was a massacre. Without their hive mind coordination, the individual devourers were much less dangerous than they had appeared. Human ships systematically destroyed the feeding tubes and bioships, while Marines continued their devastating work inside the creatures' bodies. Within 2 hours, the space around Prime was filled with the wreckage of the devourer swarm. A few of the smaller bioships managed to escape, fleeing toward the outer system, but the main threat had been eliminated. "Marine teams, begin extraction," ordered. "You've done enough damage for one day." As the Marine shuttles returned to their ships, Sergeant Major looked back at the bioship they had just gutted. It was still alive but completely disabled, drifting helplessly as its systems tried to repair the neural damage her team had caused. "Think they'll learn from this?" asked Corporal Martinez. Checked her ammunition count and smiled. "Let them try. We've got plenty more Marines where we came from." The greatest threat the galaxy had ever known had been defeated not by superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but by the simple willingness of humans to do whatever it took to win. The Devourers had met their match in a species that treated impossible odds as just another day at the office. But the real implications of humanity's victory were only beginning to be understood. Word of the battle was already spreading across the galaxy, and every alien civilization was asking the same question. If humans could defeat the unstoppable Devourers, what else were they capable of? 3 weeks after the battle, Prime was beginning to heal. The gray wastelands left by the Devourer feeding tubes were slowly being replanted with native vegetation, while construction crews worked to rebuild the damaged cities. The crystal spires that had once defined the planet's skyline were rising again, but now they stood alongside new structures, human-designed defense platforms that would ensure this kind of attack never succeeded again. Admiral stood on the observation deck of the rebuilt command center, watching human and alien workers collaborate on the reconstruction efforts. It was a sight that would have been impossible to imagine just a month ago. Two species that had never met before working together as if they had been allies for centuries. "Admiral," called High Counselor as he approached across the polished floor. The leader looked much better than he had during the desperate days of the siege, but could still see the weight of what his people had endured in his eyes. "Counselor," replied with a respectful nod, "how are the evacuation efforts proceeding?" "Better than we dared hope," said gratefully. "Thanks to your medical ships, we've been able to rescue nearly 2 million survivors from the damaged colonies. Your doctors say most will make full recoveries." Was pleased by the news, but she wasn't surprised. Human military doctrine had always emphasized the importance of saving civilian lives, even at significant cost to military operations. It was another area where human thinking differed from most alien species, who tended to focus purely on strategic objectives. "What about the survivors from the other attacked systems?" she asked. "We've received word from the Republic and the Confederation. They're sending aid ships to help with the refugee resettlement. It seems that news of your victory has inspired other species to step up their humanitarian efforts." Nodded. That was exactly what she had hoped would happen. The human rescue of the hadn't just saved one species. It had sent a message to the entire galaxy about what civilized behavior should look like. Commander appeared at shoulder, carrying a data pad with the latest reports from the fleet. "Admiral, we've got word from the pursuit squadrons. They've tracked down and eliminated the last of the Devourer stragglers. The threat has been completely neutralized." "Casualties?" "Final count is 317 killed 823 wounded, much lower than our worst-case projections. Felt the familiar weight of command settle on her shoulders. 317 human men and women had died to save an alien species they had never met before. It was a price that some would consider too high, but knew it was a cost that her people accepted willingly when the alternative was genocide. See that their families receive full honors and benefits, she ordered, and make sure they understand what those people died for. Already taken care of, ma'am. High Counselor has requested permission to build a memorial garden dedicated to our fallen. He says it will be the first thing visitors see when they arrive at Prime. Smiled slightly. It was a touching gesture, but more importantly, it was a sign that they truly understood the sacrifice that had been made on their behalf. Admiral said formally, my government has asked me to present you with an official proposal. Turned to face the alien leader fully, sensing that something important was coming. We would like to offer humanity full membership in the technological cooperative, along with access to all our scientific databases and manufacturing facilities. We also propose a formal military alliance between our species, with joint training programs and shared defense responsibilities. Considered the offer carefully. It was incredibly generous. They had some of the most advanced technology in the known galaxy. Access to their databases would advance human science by centuries, but she also knew that accepting such an offer would fundamentally change humanity's position in galactic politics. I'll need to consult with Earth before giving you a formal answer, she said diplomatically. But I can tell you that humanity values friendship with peaceful species. We would be honored to stand beside thee against future threats. His expression brightened. There is one more thing, Admiral. We have been contacted by representatives from 47 different species since news of your victory spread. They are all requesting diplomatic meetings to discuss possible cooperation agreements with humanity. Raised an eyebrow, 47 species, including some of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. The Hegemony Council wants to discuss trade agreements. The Stellar Republic is interested in joint exploration missions. Even the isolationist Void Watchers have expressed curiosity about human military methods. Commander whistled softly. Word travels fast out here. Wasn't surprised by the sudden diplomatic interest. Humanity had just accomplished something that the rest of the galaxy had considered impossible. They had defeated the Devourers in direct combat. Every species that had previously dismissed humans as primitive barbarians from a backwater system was now reconsidering their position. What kind of questions are they asking? Inquired. Consulted his data pad. Most want to know about human military capabilities. How many ships do you have? How many soldiers? What other weapons do you possess? Some are asking about trade relationships, but many seem more interested in ensuring they never become enemies of humanity. Found that both amusing and concerning. Humanity had never wanted to be feared by other species, but she understood why alien civilizations might be worried. If humans could eliminate the Devourers, what else were they capable of? How could anyone be sure that humanity would remain peaceful and friendly? Perhaps it would help if I addressed these concerns publicly, suggested. Later that day, stood before a gathering that included representatives from dozens of alien species, all connected via holographic communication. It was the largest interspecies conference in galactic history, and every word she spoke would be analyzed and debated across 1,000 worlds. Fellow sentients, she began, using the standard diplomatic greeting, I want to address some of the concerns that have been raised about humanity's military capabilities. She paused, looking directly into the main communication array. It's true that humans come from what you call It's true that we have extensive military capabilities and experience with warfare, but I want you to understand something crucial about human nature. Gestured toward the window. where and human workers could be seen collaborating on reconstruction projects. We didn't travel across the galaxy to conquer we came to save them. We didn't demand payment or territory in exchange for our help. We offered it freely because we believe that peaceful species deserve protection from those who would destroy them. She could see various alien representatives taking notes, some looking skeptical while others appeared genuinely interested in what she was saying. Yes, humanity has the largest military in this region of space. Yes, our ships are heavily armed and our soldiers are extensively trained. But those capabilities exist for one purpose: to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Ambassador and from the collective raised a tentacle to speak. Admiral, how can we be certain that humanity will continue to use its military power defensively? What guarantees can you offer that humans will not become conquerors? Had expected this question. It was the fundamental concern that every peaceful species would have about a military power as strong as humanity. Ambassador, I can offer you the same guarantee that we offered our actions. Judge us not by our capabilities, but by how we choose to use them. We had the power to demand concessions from in exchange for our help. Instead, we offered friendship. We had the opportunity to claim territory in their space. Instead, we're helping them rebuild their own worlds. She looked around at the assembled representatives. But let me be absolutely clear about one thing. Humanity will defend its friends and allies with the same determination we showed against the Devourers. Any species that threatens peaceful civilizations will find themselves facing the full might of the human military. The silence that followed was significant. Could see various representatives exchanging glances, clearly understanding the implications of what she had just said. Dr. Warren stepped forward to address a question from the scientific community. Many of our colleagues are curious about human tactical methods. Would humanity be willing to share some of our military knowledge with allied species? Considered this carefully. We would be happy to provide defensive technologies and training to our allies, but I should warn you, human military methods require a certain mindset that may be difficult for peaceful species to adopt. We fight the way we do because of where we come from and what we've experienced. Other species might find our tactics disturbing. As the conference continued, could see that humanity's position in the galaxy was changing fundamentally. Before the battle with the Devourers, humans had been seen as an interesting but minor species from the frontier regions. Now they were being courted by major galactic powers and feared by potential enemies. 6 months later, Earth's government, the Terra Alliance, the first formal military treaty between humanity and an alien civilization. Similar agreements followed with other peaceful species, who had been impressed by humanity's willingness to fight for others. But perhaps the most significant change was in galactic military thinking. For the first time in centuries, major powers began seriously investing in defensive capabilities again. The knowledge that the Devourers had been defeated by superior tactics, rather than superior numbers, had convinced many species that warfare was still a viable option for resolving conflicts. Often wondered if this was a positive development or not. On one hand, it meant that peaceful species were better prepared to defend themselves. On the other hand, it increased the risk of conflicts between major powers. Standing in her new office at Terra Station, which had been expanded to accommodate diplomatic representatives from dozens of species, looked out at the busy spaceport where human and alien ships worked side by side. The galaxy was a very different place than it had been a year ago. Humanity had answered an alien distress call and saved a dying civilization. In the process, they had revealed themselves as the galaxy's premier military power and changed the balance of interstellar politics forever. Smiled as she watched a group of young engineers working alongside human technicians on the latest ship designs. These alien children would grow up in a galaxy where humanity stood as the guardian of peaceful species, and the enemy of those who preyed on the weak. It wasn't the future anyone had planned, but it was the future humanity had chosen. And as had learned long ago, when humans made a choice, they followed through no matter what the cost. They had come home from war, but they would never stop watching the stars for new threats to face and new friends to protect. That was simply who they were.